Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. Here my opponent opens with c4. We play c6 because I play c6 against everything as the black pieces, and then he transposes with e4 and goes into an accelerated Panov attack. I'll show you after the game what the normal Panov attack would be. But he goes for the accelerated. Here, do not take with the queen. That would effectively get you into a bad Scandinavian defense after knight to c3 with tempo. This pawn isn't going anywhere. It can't be defended by any other pawns because, of course, those pawns just traded themselves off. So we can instead play knight to f6, attack the pawn with the knight, and we're going to win that pawn back. There's basically nothing that white can do about it. Okay, queen a4 sets a nice trap. If we go queen to d7, then whoops, bishop to b5, pins our queen to our king. We'd have to block with the knight, and we would lose our knight. So I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with bishop to d7, which is the obvious move. Of course, we could also play this knight there, but, you know, then it's still pinned. So bishop to d7 is the move I want to play. Is there a catch? Maybe queen b3 is the idea. Now we're not threatening to win this because our queen has been blocked off, and white is counterattacking our b7 pawn. However, if bishop d7, queen b3, I think we can play queen c8, which defends b7 and counterattacks the bishop. Although, perhaps we're just encouraging the move knight c3, which is good anyway. I don't know, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. I mean, we could play a fancy move like knight to e4. Oh, no, we can't, sorry. The rook defends the bishop. That would lose a knight. Okay, so bishop d7, queen b3 actually looks decent for white. So what about if we go knight b to d7 instead? Well, let's say knight c3, which of course defends the d5 pawn. Probably g6, preparing to fianchetto. Let's say bishop c4, adding another layer of defense. Bishop g7, knight f3, castles. Well, then our knight's coming to b6, and this pawn can't be defended sufficiently. So I think I'm actually going to block with the knight. I don't know, maybe I'm allowing d6 for white to give back the pawn that way. Ruining our structure a little bit. I don't know whether that's viable. Maybe we should go queen to b6 so that we could take with the queen if that happens. Maybe a6, preparing pawn b5 to fianchetto and bring the knight into the game. That looks interesting. Although he could just take it, and then we can't take back because our rook would hang. So, no, that's not going to be any good. Yeah, I think we should probably just play g6 and get fianchettoed, which is what I normally play against the Panov anyway. This fianchetto variation in a lot of different lines, I really enjoy it. Now let's get castled, and now knight to b6 I thought was going to be problematic. Because, I don't know, this looks pretty good to me. So white is defending his d5 pawn with 3 pieces. We are attacking with 3 pieces, so we can't take it just yet. We could take the bishop. Whoa, what on earth was that? Okay. I literally... Okay, whatever. Sorry. So we could take. And then maybe we play a6, b5, bishop, b7 to add more attackers. The issue for white is that it's very difficult for him to really defend this pawn. I do think he probably should have played d6 a bit earlier on, which I think the engine will probably agree with me on, but okay. We have the bishop pair now. We, of course, have a very strong dark squared bishop, which is kind of the point of this system. And I think a6 is just a very sound move, because if b5, we're going to be in great stead. Now, maybe my opponent can play a4 there, stopping us from going b5. So perhaps it's better to just play b6, bishop b7 instead. Now, if b6, we do have to be aware of queen to c6, hitting the rook. And we could play rook to b8, preparing bishop b7. Or if b6, queen c6, we could play bishop to a6, hitting the rook and defending our rook with our queen, preparing something like rook to c8. Maybe there's queen to a4 with skewers there. Yeah, probably rook b8 makes more sense. So I think b6. Am I weakening the c6 square for the knight to jump to, though? If b6, knight e5, bishop b7, knight c6... That's a bit annoying, actually. That is a little bit annoying. So what if we instead go for a move like bishop to f5, preparing rook to c8? And the point being that now our b-pawn maintains defense of the c6 square, because if the knight gets there, that is actually a bit frustrating. We could even consider e6, sacrificing a pawn, or trading pawns, but it is effectively a pawn sacrifice because we are planning on winning back this pawn for free and equalizing the material. You get tempo on the queen, but I don't know, queen b4 hitting b7. I don't think we really have enough compensation at all for the sacrificed pawn. So, yeah, I'm leaning somewhat towards bishop f5. Do I have to watch for this? Maybe I do. If bishop f5, knight b5... Well, I suppose I have queen d5, actually. And then that's all right. Yeah, so let's go bishop f5. I, of course, want to play a move like bishop g4, threatening to ruin white's structure. But bishop g4 can just be met with knight to e5 with tempo on my bishop, and I'm just improving my opponent's knight, like, forcibly. So that would seem a bit silly. For some reason, I didn't consider this move. We could argue the knight is a bit of a target now. We could play rook to c8, hitting the queen. If queen b5, which stops bishop d3, hits b7, and maintains defense of d5. So rook c8, queen b5. Can we do anything there? Bishop d7, queen b7. That seems like we're not getting anything. That's just bad. Here. I don't think I can make that work. So what else can we do? We could play bishop d7, but of course that seems very passive to be retreating our bishop like that. So I would like to avoid that if possible. Can I make rook c8 work? The idea being that the knight is undefended. Rook c8, queen b5, knight d5. If knight f5, then knight c3, dc, gf. Queen b7, I don't think we have enough. Yeah, we're just down a pawn, I think. And we have a bad structure. So here, we can't take on d5. What about a6? Queen b7, bishop d3, rook e1. Rook to c7. Queen b3. knight g5, knight c6, queen d6, g3. I can't see an actual threat there. I don't think we have one. So maybe bishop d7 just has to be played. Which is not a move I want to play. But, yeah, my opponent is playing this in a very frustrating manner. I suppose, though, with his knight on d4, he can't play pawn d4, which is where the pawn would ideally like to go. I mean, the pawn isn't that great on d3, so I suppose that is a bit of a bonus. Okay, rook e1. I suppose rook c8, again, should be considered. Queen b5. Sorry, no, there's no queen b5, because my bishop controls that square. So rook c8, let's say queen b3. Still not simple. e7 is weak. My opponent is spending no time here, playing very good chess. How do we do this? We could just play rook e8, defending e7. To be honest, I'm leaning more towards that, because I don't want my queen tied down to the defense of a pawn, but I also don't want to push the pawn, because I don't want white to be able to trade off d5. I want to win d5 in the future. Now, that is looking increasingly difficult, but not impossible. Again, this knight is lined up nicely with my bishop, which could be useful in the future. We do have the weak b7 pawn. He does go d3. Okay. Rook c8, queen b3. Queen c7 looks interesting. Which also stops bishop f4. And we're basically trying to make some knight g4 shenanigans work. Where this would be hit and this would be hit. Probably forcing a move like knight f3. Okay, queen b4. I think that's fine. Queen c7. We're going to defend b7 and bait my opponent into taking on e7, which I don't think he can do. I don't think he can do that. Yeah, he goes g3, getting rid of this threat. With knight to g4 ideas, which makes sense. Well, now a move like bishop h3 looks pretty strong. Because this king is very weak. And we have potential back rank ideas. Also, our queen would then defend e7. If here, I suppose queen b8, but then there's this. So maybe I have to play pawn a6. And then if rook e7, queen e7, rook e8. I think we still have compensation. Queen b4. Rook e1 check, king g2. We have to have compensation there for being down just one pawn. To be invading white's back rank like that. That's got to be worth it. So let's go a6. This is a really complicated position. If you're enjoying the videos so far, by the way, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. See if my opponent keeps blitzing out his moves or not. It's very impressive. It's very impressive, the speed at which he is the speed at which he is moving. Bishop f4, that's a move I didn't consider. Oh, that's really annoying. I did not consider that. That's a problem. Oh no, is it? Is it? I do have queen c5. And you can't take because of take. Queen c5 is probably forced. And then, I mean, it's actually not the end of the world. Trading the queens off. Because white's light squares are still very weak. And this diagonal is still potentially going to be very fruitful. So even if the queens come off the board, we still have lots of play. We could also play like king f8. So after like a trade here, king f8 could prepare rook e2 c8, doubling up so that the e7 pawn isn't hanging because it's currently being defended by the rook on e8. So we could potentially dominate the c file and cause some issues on like c3, for example. That's another very strong move. Wait, is it? Why can't I just take on d5 with tempo? Or pick up the free knight, which I just realized was hanging? What's the trick? There's no trick. That's just a free knight. Yeah. That was so anticlimactic. What? I mean, yeah, there's just no play. That's just a desperate move. And white weakens himself further. I think we actually played that position really nicely because even if my opponent didn't give us a knight for free with knight to a4, I thought we had excellent play with the dark squared bishop, and our light squared bishop would be very powerful going after these pawns potentially, or just restricting the white pieces somehow. And I think just after a simple move like king f8, our e-pawn would have been nicely secured. Our pawns do a great job of restricting my opponent's knights. So I was really excited to play that endgame, to be honest, because it was going to be difficult. Don't get me wrong, it was going to be difficult because we are still down a pawn. But I refused to believe that the d-pawn could stand. Okay, that's interesting, which seems to just incentivize us to offer more trades, which seem unavoidable. Okay, sure. And by opening up this diagonal, white has caused himself even more problems. And now he has to trade the dark squared bishops because otherwise his knight and his rook will be in a very precarious position. So now, of course, we're threatening to win the knight. Yeah, so you've got to move the knight. So I don't know, like knight f3, we could just pick up the d3 pawn with tempo. Or you could do that, I suppose. Which seems to be very kind because knight f6 followed by e5 just wins the game, no? I think my opponent's tilted at this point, which I can't really blame him for because he played a very good game of chess and then just blundered a knight for no like understandable reason. So he's just probably tilted, which yeah, fair enough. Sure, whatever. That's fine by me. Let's offer more trades, which will really struggle to avoid because the only way to avoid it would be rook to f4, in which case I can take on d3 and we already control d1, so that passed pawn will be basically unstoppable. So of course I'm happy to be trading pieces because I'm up so much material. Or you could do that. Yeah, that also is a move. Let's take here. Of course I could take and allow take, but it's more accurate just to take the e4 pawn probably. And yeah, this is pretty much in the bag. Wow, it should be in the bag, that's for sure. I hope it's in the bag. If this isn't, I really need to reevaluate whether I should be a chess player or not. But yeah, okay, my opponent resigns. Very interesting game. Looks like we've had a miss here, so interested to see where that was. I hope you guys found this very useful, especially for all you Caro Kann players. You will face the accelerated Panov, and you will potentially be very scared. So we'll jump into some of the analysis now, and yeah, let's see what the computer has to say. Okay, so 85.4% accuracy for my opponent, 92.9 for us. Looks like there were a couple of spots where we could have capitalized a bit more on our advantage before my opponent blundered, of course. So we'll check that out. So my opponent opens with c4, the English, and I go c6. Happy to transpose into a Caro, or happy to transpose into a Slav, or if my opponent plays in like a Catalan style, then I tend to play like knight f6, knight f3, bishop f5, like castles, e6, something along these lines, and just play it like a, I don't know, triangle system? I don't even know what you'd call this. And I find these positions relatively comfortable. Sometimes you can get the queens off the board, but even if you don't do that, you can just develop normally, bishop e7, castles, and play tends to happen on the queen side in these positions, I found. But my opponent transposes into the Caro with e4, so that would be exactly the same as if he'd opened with e4, we'd gone c6, and he'd gone c4. Same position. And in both cases, you played d5, which we do. And it's the accelerated Panov. Now, the normal Panov would be e4, c6, d4, d5. Oh my god. d5, take, and c4. This is the normal Panov attack. The accelerated Panov cuts out the move d4 entirely. And my opponent never plays d4, actually, which was very strange. So d5, take, and knight to f6. As I said, do not take with the queen. There is no need to give your opponent knight c3 with tempo. We're not playing a Scandinavian. So knight f6. My opponent went queen a4. And here, I found the best move, which I'm really pleased about. So I could immediately rule out this because I would just be blundering my queen or a knight. Although here, actually, I'm not even saving my queen. So, you know, I immediately ruled out queen d7. Then I was trying to figure out if bishop d7 was good, but I concluded that after queen b3, we were probably worse, which I'm also correct in. I considered a move like queen c7, defending and attacking, but after the simple knight c3, I have nothing. So, I decided that the move should be knight b to d7 instead, which is the best move. Knight c3, of course, defending d5. And here, I want to play knight b6, but I can't because it's pinned. I also can't really play a6, b5, because if I play b5, then bishop takes. And if take, then take. So I also can't do that to break the pin. Now, the engine thinks a6 is a fine move, but it still wants to go g6, bishop g7. So I play g6, which is the best move. Knight to f3, we fianchetto, and the point is that we're going to get castled to unpin the knight, and then we can play knight to b6. However, of course, we can't develop our bishop this way, because that would entail playing e6 or e5, which allow my opponent to trade off his weak pawn, and here we are just down a clean pawn with a bad structure. So we have to develop like this, which is normal in the Panov anyway. Bishop c4, we castle, and my opponent castles, which allows knight b6. And we are relatively better here, which I kind of assumed, but I struggled to find a way through. Of course, we take the bishop, and here, I saw the best move. It was b6. I saw it. I figured that queen c6 was bad because of rook to b8, which the engine agrees with me on. Because after my opponent makes a move, I'll just play bishop b7. And you can't stop me from winning back my pawn. d4 is going to be weak. We have the bishop pair, which is a beautiful bishop pair. And I mean, we are clearly better. So I saw b6. But what I was concerned about was knight to e5. And I thought, well, this is a problem. And after bishop b7, knight c6, we can't take the knight. That would allow d takes c6. White would undouble his pawns. The engine still thinks it's okay, but we have given away our advantage. What I needed to see was after knight c6, I could just play queen d7, which I hadn't considered. I thought that if we did this, then we would never be winning back the d-pawn, but the engine is far more patient than I am. It just wants to pin the knight, and if a move like rook to d1, now we take on d5, and after queen d5, we just take on c6. And after take, we have equalized the material. We're going to double up on the d file, most likely. Even if we don't win this pawn back, we have a very good bishop pair, and white has an isolated d pawn. So that's what I needed to see. Instead, I played bishop to f5, which is not amazing. But knight d4 isn't amazing either. Better is just d4, and here play continues with something like, I don't know, queen d6, rook e1, rook f2, d8, and we just go after the d pawn, which was my plan. My opponent went knight d4. I went bishop d7, which was inaccurate. I wanted to play rook c8, which was the best move, but I couldn't find a continuation after queen to b5, which is the best move for white. The only move for us to hold any kind of advantage is bishop e4. Ah, yeah, that makes sense. But if knight e4, queen here... Oh, the knight's hanging. Right. And if this straight away, then knight d5. And if take, then take, I suppose. Even still, this is difficult to evaluate. Because we are down a pawn. d3. Rook b8. Oh, we're just going to go after this, are we? Queen c... Yeah. And we will win our pawn back, and the d pawn will be weak, but so will our dark squares around the king. So it's tough to evaluate. I played bishop d7 for lack of a better move, and also because the time situation was getting a bit out of hand. You know, my opponent has more time than he started with, and I am below half my time. Rook e1, which was a good move, going after e7. Rook e8 is the best move, just defending, because I want to move my queen. d3 is the best move, opening up his bishop. Here I went rook c8, which is inaccurate. The computer wants queen b6. And if bishop f4 now... Oh, right. So we... Oh, yeah, there's way too many things hanging. Yeah, we're going to kick the queen away from the defense of the knight. So... Let's say knight f3, retreating. Here. Do we want to trade? We do. And then play a6. And then I suppose the white pawns are just so bad that we're going to win at least one of them and probably have long-term pressure. I went rook c8. Queen b4 from my opponent. Keeping an eye on the knight, hitting b7 and hitting e7. I played queen c7, which I thought was a very devious move. Point being that rook e7, I thought there was no way you can play that, because just take and rook e8. And you're going to have to give up your queen, otherwise you get mated. Another line I saw was knight takes d5, which is a very pretty idea, because your queen is hit, your knight is hit, your other knight is hit. And if you take, then I play queen takes c1 check. Queen e1 is the only move not to get mated. And after queen e1, rook e1, bishop d4, I'm just up a piece. Although there is here and here, but bishop pair versus the rook will be a very easy win because the rook has no good infiltration. So, my opponent played g3, which also stops any potential knight to g4 ideas trying to hit the knight. So let's say my opponent plays a move like bishop d2, then knight g4 looks a bit scary. But I figured my opponent could just play knight to f3, getting the knight out of harm's way, defending h2, and the engine agrees. But g3, I went a6, which is a mistake. Knight g4 is the best? How? Oh, is a5 the threat? Kicking the queen away from the defense of the knight. I figured my opponent could play a move like knight here. Or knight here. This is what I was calculating. But, okay, I can just move the queen and pin the knight. And I have so much pressure here. I played a6. I was very scared of the knight coming in. My opponent finds the best move. Bishop f4. We go queen c5, which is good. a5 was slightly better. And if take, we, of course, have two of the white pieces hanging, so we would be winning. So you have to move the queen. So queen b3, then queen c5. And now you don't have the option to trade queens. So let's say bishop e3, defending the knight. Queen d6. If you take, then I assume this is very good. Yeah, queen a7, something like rook b2, or even rook a8, the engine likes. And yeah, white has to find knight db5 to not lose on the spot. But I went queen c5, which forces a queen trade, because otherwise your knight hangs. And if you play a move like a3 defending your queen, then knight d5 wins, because too many things are hanging. So, queen c5, rook c5, and here, of course, my opponent blundered. Now, the engine evaluates this as completely equal. If my opponent finds the best move, which is knight b3, getting the knight out of danger and hitting my rook, and a move like rook c to c8, which is the only move. Now knight to a5, sorry, oh my god, knight to a5, going after b7, b5, a3, and I thought this type of position was very good for us because of the bishop on this long diagonal. Although apparently there's one move for black here to hold equality. Try and find it. Try and find it. I'm not sure I quite understand the point of the move, to be honest. But the move is knight g4. This is apparently the only move. When you see it, it actually does make sense, though. So the engine, of course, wants to open up our bishop on this long diagonal. However, if we play the move that looks natural, knight to h5, hitting the bishop and opening this up, then white has bishop e5, blocking the diagonal. And if we trade, we just lose our best piece. So the engine prefers knight g4, so that there is no bishop e5, because we have extra defense on that square. And after the move h3, asking our knight what on earth it's doing on g4, we have to find g5, counter-attacking the bishop. If the bishop retreats, then knight b5 goes after f3 and d3 with pretty devastating consequences. And if rook e3 defending both threats, then we can just play h6 and defend, and we're doing very nicely. Doing very well. And if my opponent takes on g5, then knight e5 with these threats, and after rook e3 defending, then knight g6, and we're down 2 pawns, but there's 2 things hanging, I guess. So rook 8 e1. And then we have to find an exchange sacrifice. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Huh. Probably a draw. Probably a draw. But this would have been a very interesting thing. And realistically, we would not have played 10 perfect moves. My opponent, of course, blundered a knight with bishop a4. The other move I was considering is rook takes d5 before I realized the knight was hanging. And this is just as good because there's 2 pieces hanging. But I take on a4. My opponent starts tilting and giving me all his pieces, and then blundering another piece, and then he resigns because there's nothing left to do. There's no real analysis that needs to be done on that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see another very interesting game in the Panov Attack, then check out the video up here. If you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you all for watching. Those of you that get right to the very end of the video, you are the real supporters of this channel. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. And I'll see you in the next video.